Are starting. Yes. Hello and welcome to the European Resilience Initiative Center video podcast. Today we have a live broadcast with Malcolm Nance, who is a legendary person. He's a Navy officer. He is a cryptographist. He is a Ukrainian soldier who volunteered for the Ukrainian International Legion and fought in Ukraine, and who is doing a lot of things in Ukraine. That is already the first question which we have got. So he is a legendary person who is now in the New York City, and we will talk today about the NATO Summit, the 75th NATO Summit, anniversary summit, actually. A lot of expectations, a lot of fears, a lot of hopes. So first of all, welcome, Malcolm, and thank you that you have found time for this live conversation.
Well, I'm absolutely glad to be here, and I'm absolutely glad to talk about NATO and the meaning of NATO, and on the 75th anniversary of NATO, which is, I'm not sure if that's the silver jubilee or something along that lines, but I'm glad to be here.
That is absolutely that is happy anniversary, 75 years. Gosh, like who could imagine that NATO would continue to exist for such a long time and will have meaning now, more meaning than 10 years ago or 20 years ago. 20 years ago, everyone believed that NATO has no meaning now. And look, Finland has joined the NATO, Sweden has joined the NATO, and we are talking about NATO as the fundament for the European security and for what is going on here. And indeed, like, what are your impressions from this anniversary summit, and what are your expectations? Like the world leaders are just like arrived to Washington DC, and what do you feel now, being okay, not in the same city, but pretty close to that?
Well, you know, back when I joined the military back in 1982, there used to be a magazine that NATO put out every year. And back at that time, it was called NATO 16 Nations. Well, now in that amount of time, in 40 years, NATO has doubled. It is now 32 countries, all operating together as a collective security organization, which has now been motivated thanks to Russian President Vladimir Putin, who is the greatest recruiter NATO has ever had. Better than Khrushchev, better than Stalin. He is responsible for getting two nations that have been neutral for well over 80 years to join NATO. Actually, I think it's closer to 90 years, to finally release their national neutrality and join NATO. And I think if trends are going to continue as they are, with NATO's 75th year and Vladimir Putin acting as recruiter in chief, I am certain we will get Switzerland at some point and Liechtenstein to join NATO.
Yeah, like I'm afraid we will have Austria with its famous. Okay, I hope that now we are fine. Okay, it seems that now we are fine. I'm very sorry for this technical problem that we have encountered. Please, if you see us, yeah, I see, we are back. That is amazing. So, once again, sorry for this interruption. And
It's
for
okay.
those who join us now, we are talking now live with this broadcasting from Berlin and New York City with Malcolm Nance, who is a Navy officer, who is a Ukrainian soldier who has joined International Legion of Ukraine, and who fought for Ukraine for a long time in the hardest parts of the Ukrainian front, and who is now in the New York City. And we will talk about the NATO Summit and what does it mean, the 75th NATO Summit Jubilee, and 20 years ago, as we saw, like nobody hoped that NATO has a future. Now all hopes are in NATO. Welcome, Malcolm. Welcome back. I'm very sorry for this German internet problem, and I think like we need to review our technical strategy, or maybe like some Russian want to listen.
It's okay.
We are
Glad to be back.
welcome back. But well, once again, like jokes aside and fun aside, we are seeing that we are in a very severe situation now. Yesterday, Ukrainian capital Kiev has been attacked by Russian missiles, and
Mm.
the largest children hospital has been hit with a missile strike by the Russians. At least 40 people have been killed in this hospital only. Dozens have been wounded. Children with oncology, with cancer, had to flee from the Russian missile attack. Terrible. And one of Germany's like most prominent journalists who spent months and months in Ukraine, Paul Ronsheimer, who I respect a lot, who was one of the first of German journalists in Bucha, he said that NATO is morally bankrupt because NATO could not protect Ukraine. What do you think about it?
I mean, I can understand how people are upset. I've seen that hospital. It got hit not once, but 4 times by missiles, by Russia's largest land attack missiles with the intent to hit the hospital and kill those people, to destroy civilian infrastructure, as well as hit a couple of power plants, which is it's reprehensible. I just cannot see how the Russian mind fathoms this as some sort of success, considering the amount of technology that they expended, amount of money that they expended, and now I guess they think that people fear them when they kill children in hospitals. However, with regards to NATO, NATO is a treaty organization. It is not a rescue force. It is not an organization that exists unless it is in the interest of the alliance that operates outside of the alliance. There are things that are triggered when NATO is activated, and that is the manpower, the blood, sweat, and tears and national treasure of now 32 nations. For a country that is outside of the alliance, Ukraine, is getting an enormous amount of resources. Is it everything Ukraine wants? Absolutely not. Is it everything I wanted when I was there? Certainly not. I mean, we were starved for even the most basic things, in the first year of the war. And we're now starting our third year of this war. And some things were held up deliberately by the conservatives in the United States, acting on the direction of Donald Trump, who was acting in the interest of Vladimir Putin. And for 8 months, Ukraine got nothing. At a time that it needed surface to air missiles, it needed more weapon systems for basic air defense. Got down to where policemen were shooting at drones with rifles. And the United States and NATO could have provided all those resources. However, we are a nation of laws in the United States. We cannot just send things. When I met Minister Reznikov last year, I was the first Legionnaire he had ever met, which is really weird. uh, out of such a large force. And he told me the defense Secretary of Defense Austin really skirts up to the line of just under illegal, right? Just above below being illegal to get Ukraine what it needs. And then once it's signed off on by the President of the United States, money's resources are allocated, it's already there. It's like sitting in Zhuzhov, Poland. It's right there at the border. It just needs that piece of paper to go across the border. Europe itself, the European Union, individual countries like France are really, and the Czech Republic are really stepping up to the plate. The Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, they see their own survival in the survival of Ukraine. And now resources have always been flowing out of those countries. The first battle ration I ate was Lithuanian, I think. In Ukraine, I was having boiled chicken and rice from a kitchen, and then our first field rations were coming from the Baltic states, as were all of our vehicles. So Europe has really done that. But is NATO falling down on the job in the protection of
Oh, Malcolm, I cannot hear you anymore. Is it? Hmm. Okay. Can you please continue talking? No, I cannot hear you anymore. Uh, yeah, no sound anymore. That is strange. Huh? Can you? Oops. No, there is something strange with the sound. Oh gosh, it is indeed something which I cannot explain. I'm so sorry. Um, hmm. Okay, I can hear you now. I can hear myself now, at least. Mhm. Yeah, Malcolm, can you please continue talking so we can check if you are online or not? I'm very sorry for this interruption. Please, can you type if you can hear me on the YouTube? I think Malcolm will now reboot his device, and we will check if he will be able to join us with these like technical problems. Not only NATO is experiencing technical problems, but also our Germany, Berlin, uh, Germany, Berlin, um, broadcasting. Hey, Cheryl Watley from Arizona. Welcome from Arizona. I hope it is not too hot in Arizona, or at least you have functioning climate condition devices. Okay, yeah, Malcolm. Now I can hear you. I can hear you now. Yes. So we are back. We are back online. Um, yes. Just a moment. Okay, I will check if it will function correctly. Uh-huh. And yes, it should work now. Yes. You should be online now, and we
Okay.
sound Malcolm. Welcome back. Welcome back.
It's the Russians. They're jamming us.
It's absolutely, or once again, our German internet, not famous for being too fast.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So, look, if we can like come back to what we have discussed recently, if I may summarize what you said, is that NATO is doing a good job, and Ukraine is getting as much as Ukraine could get in the like on the level of what is possible, and that is, I think, is very important to understand that the level of possible is also not infinite, unfortunately, uh,
Mhm.
independent on the fact that we would like it to see. But how can we make it as bigger as we can with more funding, right? And
Right.
many European countries have underfinanced their military budgets for a longer time. We have seen that Germany's Minister of Defense, Boris Pistorius, even now is not happy with how much Germany spends for the military cause. We know that many countries still do not reach the 2% of GDP NATO spending, and only practically Poland, with 4.12% of their GDP, is a champion of military spending. So, what is going on here? Can we say that this need for funding is being in the heads of all NATO members?
Well, I mean, the war in Ukraine has shown that there are a lot of cracks in the system, and countries that thought they were going to rely on the United States to provide all the resources in the face of a major European war now understand that the United States doesn't have that capacity. We're only now just starting to create the number of artillery shells to replace the ones that we had that we're sending to Ukraine just in the last year. And we still had to buy shells from Israel, in other countries, South Korea, every spare artillery shell on the Latin American market and the Middle Eastern market. We're talking shells that were built in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, which are still fine steel, are being sent to Ukraine because that battlefield eats artillery. All right, artillery is still queen of the battle, in Ukraine. So NATO nations are finally looking at this and going, we may not have the United States as an ally in an engagement which is in our national interest. Donald Trump, as president, actually said to the prime minister of Sweden, which might explain, by the way, why Sweden is now in NATO, when he said that, he didn't understand that NATO wasn't an economic organization, but a defense alliance, and that he wanted to be like Sweden. He wanted to remove the United States from NATO and just work with them. Well, if you're a leader in Poland or Germany or some other country and you hear this and you realize that the United States may not ever come to your defense and that it's ideologically changing away from the way that it's been for the last 75 years, then you realize it's time to put up the money and start working not just towards the 2% of what NATO has, but the resources that you might need to fight an enemy at arm's distance, the way Holland is fighting Russia. Look, the Dutch have a complaint. Okay, they had over 250 civilians mass murdered by Russia. So they are getting their payback by giving these old armored personnel carriers, the F-16 fighter jets and other resources, artillery, and buying new, which will make the Dutch defense industry stronger. Germany is seeing that now. Everyone in Europe is realizing that the the standard way of buying 1 or 2% of equipment every 20 or 30 years is just not the way business is going to be done when you have a major near peer adversary like Russia that you have to fight. So everything the United States gives to Ukraine, for example, right now, all of the Patriot missiles, they're the oldest missiles in the United States inventory, or Israel's inventory, or Germany's inventory. And now they are being replaced dollar for dollar with the highest level technology missile that we have, THAAD and other systems. So it's a free upgrade to Europe. And European nations are suddenly realizing they need this upgrade.
Absolutely. And speaking of the Netherlands and the Dutch impact and positive impact on our security, first of all, like we have now former Prime Minister of the Netherlands, Mark Rutte, who is the new leader of the NATO. There have been like questions, and from myself personally, about like Rutte's past and his role in building Nord Stream pipeline, Nord Stream 1. We all remember the photo when where like Mark Rutte together with Angela Merkel and Gerhard Schröder, two infamous German chancellors, but also with Dmitry Medvedev, the nowadays alcohol addicted Telegram troll, and with the former Stasi officer Baring, celebrating open of the Nord Stream 1 pipeline. But it was like 2 decades ago, and the last years under the presidency, under the prime ministership of Mark Rutte, the Netherlands have done a dramatical impact, positive impact for the Ukrainian cause. And now the Netherlands is one of the first countries which is about to transfer F-16 jets to Ukraine. And the new Prime Minister Dick Schoof said that I quote, his defense minister Ruben Brekelmans, who says, "We will deliver F-16s and parts of Patriot systems soon. It's crucial and extremely urgent." So while the Netherlands are a part of solution, obviously, for Ukraine, what other countries can Ukraine hope to rely on? We have seen the speech of Ruslan Stefanchuk, the chairperson of the Ukrainian parliament in the Washington, D.C. on NATO Parliamentary Leaders Summit, when he said, "Give us more patriots, give us more guns."
Right. Well, and that's exactly what they need. They need to secure their air defense. And I think the arrival of the F-16s will do a lot to help secure that air defense. You know, when I was in Ukraine in my first year in Ukraine, I dodged 18 caliber cruise missiles. When I say dodged, I mean I was within 1 kilometer of where they impacted. That's the blast radius of 18 calibers. I have a famous one when I was in Kharkiv and I had moved to a new safe house way on the west side of the city in order to have a nice quiet place. And my third night there, 4 caliber cruise missiles blew up the power plant 2 kilometers away from my house. And the missiles came right over my house. The point is, air defense is the number one system that, let's be honest, NATO neglected air defense in all but name. You know, Germany is now realizing they need advanced air defense systems. The systems like NASAMS, which is a short to medium, a short range really air defense system, which is brilliant. I've seen it fire in Kyiv and knock down missiles, but it was almost an afterthought in how air defense was done. One of the most brilliant systems that's being used now that was discarded. It is a 50-year-old system. Is the German Gepard anti-aircraft gun system? I remember the
And I
very
need
day.
to add here, we wanted to scrap them all. Our ministry believed that we don't need them. And the only reason why we have them is that Germany's bureaucracy is extremely slow in implementing decisions. So instead of scrapping them uh, immediately, we have started to deliver like some sort of a plan, like a responsibility, and a lot of Excel paperwork and
Mhm.
Excel sheets, etc. So we just like we didn't have time to scrap them, and that was a miracle because like until the time when they were needed, if Germany would have functioned smoothly, we would have scrapped them like a decade before. It's a miracle that we have them.
It is. And to tell you the truth, I remember the very day in October of 2022 when I suddenly saw 3 Gepards being moved from Kharkiv to Kiev. And I said, oh, that's a sign. The sign was they saw a gap in their air defense from these Shahed drones. And Shahed hadn't really been fired a lot at that point, but the Ukrainians were the Ukrainians are brilliantly adaptive. Let me tell you something about the Ukrainians. Okay, you want to fight with a Ukrainian. I mean, next to a Ukrainian. If they don't have something, they will definitely adapt whatever they have to it, whether it's a slingshot or something, and they will use it to its maximum capability. And Gepard has turned into the Shahed killer. If it comes within range, it's not going to survive. And I know one of the biggest problems in the first year was getting authorization to find more of this 40 millimeter, 35 millimeter ammunition that it needed, which I believe was being made in Switzerland, if I'm not mistaken. And so now, to the point where it has turned out to be so good, Germany's now going to Sky Ranger, which is a way more advanced system than Gepard. But Gepard is it is a Cold War era system that is proving to not only that AAA is actually effective, that it is now a critical infrastructure weapon, a critical infrastructure defense weapon, so that you don't have to spend $100,000 missile when you can shoot off 150, 200 euros of ammunition and kill a $35,000 Iranian drone. And you're right. But these systems that we've been using and giving to Ukraine, these were designed to defend the Fulda Gap. Okay. There was a very interesting commentary by an analyst who said, "You would never believe it. The day has arrived where a Bradley infantry fighting vehicle is battling in sight of a BTR 80." And they were in the same video. And it's like, this is what we expected to see in 1976. We did in 1980 in Germany. We never expected to see this battle unfold anywhere in Europe. But it just goes to show that the capabilities we built into our weapon systems 50 years ago, our earliest models are far, far exceed anything Russia can put onto the battlefield today.
That is indeed the case, and we have seen the battle, like how Ukrainian Bradley dismantles Russian T-90 tank
That's
with
a
this
metaphor.
automatic gun, and I don't speak about like other engagement of the Western equipment against the Russian produced one. But before we go further, first I want to thank Fonris. I hope that I pronounced the name correctly. You have donated $5 and say remember the stolen children. Indeed, dozens of thousands of Ukrainian children have been kidnapped by Russia. Like Ukraine has names of about 200, about 20,000 thousand of children where they are sure that they have been kidnapped. The Russians say about, if I'm not mistaken, 300,000 children, which seems to be like almost every child like who stayed on the territory Russia has occupied. Terrible numbers, and indeed it is what we cannot forget, that is a clear case for genocide, according to United Nations Convention on Prevention of Genocide. And don't forget to like, to share, subscribe to this channel. We are lacking, if I'm not mistaken, now 3% only, 3 subscribers to reach 8,000 subscribers. It's much less than Malcolm Nance has on his YouTube channel, and I urge you to subscribe his channel too. You will not regret it, never. And he is full of insight. But before we go further, let me ask you the question, which is maybe not as positive as information about like Bradleys and Gepard and other equipment. We have in NATO also, and in the EU also, a person who is not as effective as Gepard in protective Ukraine, and maybe as bad as a Caliber missile. His name is Viktor Orban.
Yeah.
And some people call him a Russian submarine in the EU and in NATO. And recently, he has even visited Moscow, where he pledged for some sort of negotiations and peace between Russia and Ukraine. Nobody in Ukraine believed him, but still, like, he's a prime minister of a NATO member country, and he's famous for blocking important decisions. How dangerous is the existence of such leaders like Orban or like his Slovakian counterpart Fico and others?
Well, they're very dangerous, but only in the sense that they can slow things down. They can't stop everything. There is no procedure in NATO for getting rid of a country that doesn't go along with you. I'm sure that there's probably some secret vault where they do actually have a secret procedure, but we've always had leaders that were problematic. But leaders are not permanent. Depends on, I mean, unless you're in Russia or China, right? Orban is still can be held to the, to his society's need for him and the ability to do his politicking. There has been a great pushback in Budapest and how he has run his government, and this siding with authoritarians and moving their country more towards authoritarianism. The greatest threat, though, is the largest NATO nation. It's the United States. We change leaders every 4 years, and right now, Donald Trump is coming back with a vengeance. And he admires Viktor Orban greatly. He loves him. All of his senior leadership have visited Hungary and have, are emulating his disdain for the news media, ignoring the courts, making up his own rules, and his absolute puppy love for Vladimir Putin. That is a much, much greater threat than anything that could be happening in Hungary right now. Um, you know, the uh, one of the things that you can do is you can work your way around. It's another thing if the United States comes in on an anti-NATO platform, which is what Trump is pushing. Um, Designed to, with a platform where he's designed to pressure Vladimir Zelensky into surrendering the 5 provinces that are occupied by Russia. I think it might even be 6: Zaporizhia, Kherson, and you know uh, that is an anathema to anybody who understands what the purpose of the organization is about. Treason, so treason comes in many different forms and in many different shapes, but we were always going to have to be prepared for somebody or someone who would not be who would not have the alliance's interests at heart, or about
Indeed,
just one of them.
absolutely. But we have also seen the Indian leader visit Moscow, hugging Vladimir Putin and saying that Vladimir Putin is a reasonable man and he would never like come to idea to do anything wrong, like, and practically serving propaganda speaking mouth of Russia. And Russia is trying like to unite countries like China, India, Iran, countries from South Korea, from South America. Thankfully, like we have like people from Argentinian leader who is being criticized in his country by many, and I cannot judge here the internal Argentinian discussion, of course, because I'm not an expert on this particular case. It's up to Argentinians to decide if they like their leadership or not. But from the European point of view, the current leader of Argentina is much better than, let me say, the current leader of Brazil, because
Right.
the current leader of Brazil hugs Vladimir Putin, who is a bloody dictator and a murderer, and Argentinian leader does not. And from this
Well,
perspective, I clearly love the second one, and despite the first one. And if they are good or bad persons for the internal politics, I cannot say here anything.
but
But
let's
we
let's
have,
just take a quick look at Modi in India. Yeah, he hugs Putin, but he's not taking his oil. He's not selling his oil. He is quietly planning to give Russia back a lot of its weapon systems that are cheap. He's looking to buy or produce modern weapon systems from the West. Russia has proven to themselves on the global market that they are worthless and their resources are worthless. And the only thing that they have is what little cash they have left to share around BRICS. And that's why sub-Saharan Africa, goes along with their bribery schemes to buy off entire nations and leaderships, which allows Al Qaeda and Shabab and groups like that to rise up. Brazil is it's performative because it doesn't do anything for the Brazilian economy other than maybe, sell cookies to Moscow through a third nation. But the things that really matters, which is hard power, diplomatic power, economic power, the only one who has any interest here that's worth anything is China. Whereas India is definitely going to be, switching from the AK-47 and the T-72 and the T-80 and Su-37 to Western or Indian produced weapon systems, which are a lot better. And that means that Russia is going to lose yet another large chunk of economic change. So I'm not going to cry over that.
well, but Malcolm, I now would like to go to the questions which our
Sure.
audience has left. First of all, there are questions which our audience have left in our community posting, under a community posting, where we openly urge them to do it and to leave questions for you, and then we will work one by one, hopefully, the questions from the chat. And while we are doing that, you may post your comments in the chat. You can write your questions, and please believe me that we will address them all as much as time we have. We are
Mhm.
absolutely interested in interacting with you, and your questions are actually why we do it in live format and not in recording format, because you can follow the discussion and ask your question. So we had like several questions from the community posting, and first one was my question for Malcolm would be, what is his assessment of the state of Russian military logistics? It seems like that is and always has been a weak point in the Russian military, and how can Ukraine further exploit this weakness?
Well, it's simple. It's in a very poor state, and there's a reason it's in a very poor state because the Russians have a culture of corruption, and it's easy to steal, small amounts of things, pilfer small amounts of things when you're producing them on a large scale. But the things that they're pilfering, I mean, a good example the other day is a poor Russian soldier received body armor, and it had wood blocks in the place of the ceramic plates. Not even steel plates. I had fine steel plates made in Ukraine in my first set of body armor. They're so beautiful, I wouldn't even give them back. The Russians got, sometimes they get foam pads from China or they get blocks of wood. And that's where that came through the logistics system. They find their rations are old and moldy. I've captured Russian rations. And apart from the rations that were used by the Spetsnaz and the VDV, they had their own special ration pack that were up to date. Most Russian rations were disgustingly old, and these soldiers have to eat them. That produces health problems. It's all from the theft of money and the logistics pipeline. By the way, Yevgeny Prigozhin was the guy who was responsible for the contracts of food to the Russian army. So take that as you may. Produced lots of billionaires in Russia, but the Russian network, the Russian ability to produce what they want when they want it now is being impacted by sanctions. And of course, the people who have no interest in supporting the now 3-year-old 3-day war when they're not going to make any money. They don't do it for loyalty to Mother Russia. They don't care. It's no longer a communist nation. It is a capitalist nation. If they can't make money, steal money, or be part of the mafia to extort money, then they're not going to do it. So the logistics system is, if they produce 100 pairs of boots, maybe 10 pairs get distributed in Ukraine from soldiers that are actually getting them, and they probably have to buy them too. Go to what a funny thing, a funny little story aside. I took a Russian position outside of Kharkiv in a town called Ivanivka, and I found all these bags of gear and clothes that were shipped on personal orders from a tactical military store in Moscow. And it was like shoe boots and pants and underwear. And I'm like, wait a minute. They're buying Chinese airsoft copy clothes because their own logistics system can't supply them with whatever it is that they wanted. But on the other hand, in the command post, they had 6 brand new washing machines and dryers still in cardboard boxes, stolen from Epicenter, the Ukrainian hardware store, ready to be shipped back to Moscow. It's theft and barter. I mean, it's an ancient
Absolutely. And
system.
I remember how the Russian postal service installed special postal offices in Belarus where
Yes.
soldiers were allowed to send, if I'm not mistaken, up to 200 kilogram of the goods to their home cities. And it's clear that 200 kilograms is not a postcard which you send from the front line. It's something more substantial, and that's actually a good tradition of Russian army. In 1945, they have done the same in Germany, where they had these quotas, how many kilogram a soldier may send home, a sergeant, a junior officer, senior officer. Marshal Zhukov was famous for having sent to Moscow several trains full of stuff he has looted in Germany, and that was actually a part of accusation against him under Khrushchev when he was dismissed from his leading position, that he was extensively looting in Germany. Yeah, but now that the Russians did the same, and it was for the Ukrainians who hacked that postal service, it was possible to localize the addresses of the soldiers and officers and their names who have looted, because they have traced all the parcels. But
Mhm.
we have the next question, which
Sure.
a person has left, and it is, why are NATO suddenly not as keen for Ukraine to join when war is over? And that is indeed an interesting question, because the rhetorics is very bright. We hear that it was used all euphemisms, like the doors is open, or we are
Mhm.
about to build a bridge for the NATO. So it seems like people are competing in how beautiful they can express that Ukraine is not welcome.
No, I think that there are some nations that are saying that, they're diplomats, they're trying to be circumspect. NATO treaty requires that a nation be at peace and not at war at the time of their joining. I think Russia will keep it in a circumstance to where that will either be so nebulous that NATO will have to waive that. It would require a lot of things. It would require, of course, Ukraine coming in. If there is a rifle shot across the border from Belgorod, NATO and its forces would have to respond. I think with NATO and the alliance is really waiting for Ukraine to whittle them down. Ukraine, despite what people think, there with no summer offensive this year, Ukraine is still winning this war. They are beating Russia. I mean, what was it? Russia lost over 10,000 soldiers to take 20 apartment blocks. I mean, I've met General Syrskyi. I met General Pavlyuk before the war. I knew these guys were big fighters. I met General Zalushny before he became ambassador to the UK. They'll take that deal every time. If it's like 5 kilometers for 10,000 dead Russians, I will take that deal. It is a war of attrition, and it appears that Russia is actually sustaining more attrition than people ever thought that they could, and that they, in fact, may be closer to folding than anyone ever thought Ukraine was. So there's a possibility that Ukraine could be at peace in the next year, year and a half, if they get the resources that they need to continue the fight.
Well, absolutely, and we know that for the Russians, it's that bad Soviet tradition which the Russians have inherited. Like they know these orders, like go ahead, and the top commander is lying to his supervisory, and his supervisory is lying further, and on the top there is a guy like who says, "Yeah, I want to have this city for like some holiday." Like for some like victory day or for the New Year Eve, etc. And I remember, like, I regularly go to the front line in Ukraine, providing the Ukrainian army with equipment which we buy for the nations for our European Resilience Initiative Center. Last time I've been last week to the 47th Brigade and to the 92nd Brigade, both mechanized brigades in
Yes, my guys.
Donetsk region.
Yeah.
They're tough guys, real heroes, and we've brought them like 200 of multifunctional light surveillance drones, like for search and rescue missions, for observation missions, for other missions. And I remember, like, when I come to them like every month practically, and they told me that uh, several weeks before the 9th of May, what the Russians celebrate as their own victory in World War II, which they have,
Right.
of course, achieved without the Americans, without the Brits, without anyone, all alone. The Russian attacks on Avdiivka Pokrovsk axis were incredibly hard. And one day after, they stopped
Yeah.
because they believed that the Russians wanted to have it for the 9th May. And the same happened for the so-called elections of Vladimir Putin.
Right.
The attacks weeks before because the Russians wanted to take Avdiivka, but as it didn't happen until the so-called elections of Vladimir Putin, they significantly reduced the level of attacks. They have taken Avdiivka later, but not with that pressure. And my counterparts in Ukraine said they really fight for a certain day. It's incredibly, they don't
Right.
value the life of their soldiers.
Well, I have a saying that, many of the attacks that we saw, cruise missile attacks, hypersonic missile attacks, offensives kicking off, everything appeared to have been done for the 9 o'clock meeting in Moscow the next day to brief the big guy. And you'd be sitting there, and I would look at all of these cruise missile attacks, and I've planned airstrikes, I've planned attacks at the theater level, and you look at them and you go, what is the purpose of that? I don't understand why that was done. It's because sometimes the guys in the army would say strategic aviation isn't doing anything. And then strategic aviation would say, well, I shot 25 caliber missiles in 4 Kinzhals yesterday. And you can almost see them writing it down and getting it onto PowerPoint to show to Vladimir Putin. It's like, this is not a way to fight a war. Wasting 4 hypersonic missiles on a children's hospital only pleases the inner sadist of Vladimir Putin. No other
But
person.
that is indeed the way how the Russians run this war. They have done it in Aleppo in Syria. They have done it in
Yes.
Chechnya. They are hunting civilians. They're killing children. that is how they believe they can break the will of the Ukrainians. That's why there was that mass rape, not only because they are like they are savages, they are like they're actually brutal army, which is happy to act like that.
Mm,
But it's also because it's their way. They believe they
mm,
can break the will of the Ukrainian people. But a very interesting question which came
mm.
from Gazer873, and thank you for your donation of €12 for the Ukrainian cause. And he asks, or she, uh, do you think Russia had anything to do with Hamas attack on October 7th, like training, weapons, funding, etc.? All on Putin's birthday, Russia's irritating reaction, connections to Russia-Ukrainian war, question mark.
Funny you should mention that, because when I went to Israel in January, I was there for about 6 weeks, tagging around with the Israeli army, working with Israeli intelligence to find out about how the October 7th attacks occurred. One of the things that we investigated, or I investigated, I wanted to know, was Russia's links to Hamas. Directly, no. Directly, no, right? Indirectly, well, there are a lot of different links. There is video of Hamas members, or what are purported to be Hamas members, wearing PMC Wagner patches, and they didn't seem particularly Russian to me. There have been videos where Hamas soldiers on October 7th were shouting in a combination of Russian and Arabic. It's quite possible that Hamas could have gotten people trained through trainers that were in Libya. I was in Libya in 2011 when the big training, when the big rebellion happened there. But Russia has since come in there in a big way with PMC Wagner. They lost. A lot of them went to South Sudan. And also, don't forget the Iranian connection. They are deep with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, deep. A lot of Hamas commanders were sent to Lebanon on mobile training teams. They were exfiltrated out through Egypt, given passports and identities, flown to other places to do training. A lot of them went on to Yemen, went on to Iran. So Russia supports all of these activities. They're sort of the way the Soviet Union was in the Cold War, where they would be training the Irish Republican Army or the Red Army faction, or in Germany, Baader Meinhof Red Army faction and Action Direct in France, or some small groups, but they had their resources. And then when the Cold War stopped, we found that billions had gone to terrorist groups. So yes, there is some connection to Hamas that we can put our finger on directly. No, other than some peripheral belief that PMC Wagner was involved.
Now, interestingly, I have talked recently with an Israeli volunteer for the Ukrainian army, Ari Ben Yehuda,
Ari, love that
who
guy.
has fought. Hey, he's amazing, amazing guy, like a true hero. And he fought for 2 years, I think, in Ukraine. Was wounded, participated in the liberation of Kherson, and he said he has no doubt that Russia was involved in that attack, in a form of preparation and sharing knowledge.
Oh yeah,
And
intelligence.
yeah, and we know that the attack took place on Vladimir Putin's birthday. Vladimir Putin loves to kill his enemies on his birthday. The attack was in interest, practically, of Russia to divert the attention from the Ukrainian attack of Russia. And Ukraine needed ammunition, Ukraine needed stuff, and the stuff was rerouted to Israel for a good reason. And of course, we have seen the delegations of Hamas visiting
Well,
Moscow.
let me tell you something about the population of Israel, though. Boy, you want to talk about a group of people that hate Russia right now. They really think Russia had a big hand in October 7th. So whatever they may have gained by supporting Hamas, they're going to lose it, because now we're talking about Israel is maybe in negotiations with the United States to send over all their reserve Patriot batteries and missiles. They may have shot themselves in the foot.
Absolutely, absolutely, totally agree. And we have another question, and this is
Sure.
interestingly the question which was asked in both our community community posting and in the live chat now,
Mhm.
and it is actually about the U.S. restrictions on hitting Russia's sovereign territory. So
Mhm.
U.S. has provided Ukraine with free hand to shoot missiles, ATACMS missiles against Russia, but not the whole territory of Russia, just a limited one. So how do you assess this development? Is it is it what Ukraine needs in that extent, or is it last too late? And Gather 873 thanks you for you have answered their question.
Well, I think part of the problem here is not knowing precisely what the restrictions are. I mean, I know a lot of people give Jake Sullivan a lot of grief, the national security advisor, but there are a lot of forces at work who don't want to see U.S. weapon systems blowing up in Moscow. We can understand that. But look, if I were President Zelensky, I would have learned very early on. First off, he could have come to me out, in Kharkiv and asked me my opinion. And I would have told him straight. We have this philosophy of whoops in the armed forces where when you tell us not to do something and then we do it, we go, whoops. you know, I I would be pushing those restrictions beyond belief because what are we going to do? Stop supplying them? We are not going to stop supplying them. I would have. I mean, I don't understand why Ukraine even agreed to that. Russian air bases are now in the sights of long distance drones. They're destroying the oil sector of Russia. But the kind of weapon systems that they have, like ATACMS and things like that, we're not going to know where every one of them is fired at.
And by the way, like regarding these restrictions, we have seen that Ukraine pretty much ignored the Jake Sullivan's
Yeah,
urge not to hit Russian oil refineries. And
yeah.
okay, you warned us, but what can we do? You don't send us what we want, so we have to fight with what we have. And if you like Russia's precious oil, help us to finish this war, and you will have as much oil as you want. And
Mhm.
after that, the U.S. Administration has allowed the strike on Novorossiysk oil terminal on the Black Sea. But we have another question, and
Sure.
I think it is resembles a bit like what you mentioned in the beginning of this conversation.
Mhm.
Donald Trump's possible connections to Russia. How much
Oof.
of that is on the stake?
Well, it's real, and a lot of it is at stake. I wrote 4 books on the relationship between Donald Trump and Russia. And, first it started, he is madly in love with Vladimir Putin. Let me tell you how far back Donald Trump's relationship extends, whether he knows it or not. When he married Ivana Trump in 1977, uh, her father in what was then Czechoslovakia, right? The Soviet Socialist Republic of Czech Republic. Um, at that time, the reporting entity for the STB for Czech intelligence was her father, who was pushed by the government to report on everything Donald Trump, the American millionaire, was doing. And he did. And he reported for over 2 decades. So Russia has an extensive KGB file. Now, a lot of people go, "Oh, you just hate Trump." That's not true. Well, like I said, I've written 4 books about this. And if you don't believe me, go believe the files. The files were all put out by Czech television, and they did a documentary on them where they show you the actual cables that were sent by Czech intelligence to the KGB, right? The KGB back then watched everyone. And they knew that by 1988, when Donald Trump wanted to run for president, they knew he was serious about it because they were monitoring the phone communications between Ivana Trump and her father. And he was writing up reports for them at the same time. And that's why the Russians were so open to get him to travel to Moscow in 1988, 1989 because they knew he could be manipulated. And he was. And he took all this admiration dropped on him as these people are white, these people are like me. He likes Eastern European women. His second wife or his third wife was Slovenian. at a time where Slovenia was still part of Yugoslavia, you know, under Tito, not communist, but communish. And, he just opened himself up to being a unwitting asset. First, he was really a useful idiot, then a unwitting asset. And then he became a very witting asset in 2014 when he went to Moscow for the Miss Universe pageant, and they schmoozed this guy about giving him Trump Tower. And look, to tell you how simple the man was, he thought that he could bribe Vladimir Putin with a penthouse.
Yeah, indeed. And we know that these travels to Moscow were
Amazing.
excessive, and they continued for decades. Like, I was born in the Soviet Union, and I was maybe like 8, 9 years when one of the Soviet movies was produced on like a comedy show about like some KGB mafia adventures in the US. And at the end, you can see like they thanked Donald Trump and the team of Taj Mahal Casino for providing them shooting scenes. So Donald Trump was involved in that very business, like trying to get all possible connections. And we know that Russia has always been like a holy place for all people who wanted to do things which they cannot do at their home, especially if it is about like women or like other excessive things. But
Funny thing you
what
should mention it, because one of the things that I did when I wrote my book, The Plot to Destroy Democracy, how Putin and his spies were damaging America now to dismantle the West. One of the things that I learned about the alt-right, right, the right-wing extremists in the United States was they viewed Russia as the last bastion of hot white women in the world. And it was a motivating factor for everything that they did. And Trump, the same thing, easily purchased, right? Easily, manipulated. Vladimir Putin, I went to his office in Dresden when he was a baby spy, and I went and visited where he worked. That guy loved manipulating people. He loved the game. And for him, when Trump was running for president, he must have just turned to his right and said, "Bring me the KGB file on Trump." And then they brought in a giant cartwheel, a giant wheelbarrows full of reports on Trump. And he said, "I can manipulate this man. He'll be my, he'll be, I'll have him wrapped around my finger in no time."
Indeed, and we know like that if you look at the far right actors who are in acting in favor of Russia, who came to Moscow and who work for Russian propaganda, they all have like things in common. They had like a sort of persecution back home. There are like some stories about their past, which are more or less dirty, mostly more than less, and they
Oh,
all
come on.
find like their
Leave Scott
refugium.
Ritter alone, man.
They find their refugium in Moscow. But let me play like a devil's advocate for a moment, because like
Okay.
we all know bad things about Trump. Still in Ukraine, some people say, okay, what has Biden given us? A lot, but not enough. And
Really?
what Trump has given us, they say, okay, like he was the first who have provided Ukraine with Javelin missiles. He was the only one
Uh,
who sent tomahawks against Assad troops in Syria. And he was the guy who warned the Germans about Nord Stream 2 danger, they say. So
Wait,
maybe
let,
Trump is not that bad.
let me take them one at a time. Okay. First off, the Javelin missiles were actually um, conceptualized and authorized under Barack Obama after night vision and blankets, but they had restrictions on them. The weapon systems hadn't arrived there. They were awaiting authorization. They were bipartisan approved in House and the Senate. Donald Trump used that shipment of missiles to extort Vladimir Zelensky and said, if you do not give me or make up an investigation about Joe Biden, I will not authorize the release of this $420 million worth of Javelin missiles. Now, these were the same missiles that saved Ukraine. Full disclosure, I went through the Javelin course out at Yavoriv when I was with Gur. I loved the Javelin missile, never got to fire one in combat. Everybody fought to shoot the Javelin. Everybody. All right. I tried to pay a guy $2,000 to let me have his Javelin. He wouldn't do it. And he blew up a tank with it too. So I'm really mad. But that was not Donald Trump. Donald Trump extorted Ukraine, demanded that they make up an investigation. He got impeached because of Zelensky, and he hates Zelensky. He loves the KGB director in chief of Russia, loves him to the point where he sided with a KGB officer at Helsinki rather than people like me in U.S. intelligence. He hates his own country. He loves being manipulated by someone he sees as a leader on the world stage. Okay? So he did nothing. There's nothing good about Donald Trump. I worked in U.S. intelligence for the better part of almost 40 years. I am a realist. I only exist for the game. I am out to protect my country and other countries that are in my interest sphere. I know an idiot when I see one. And that man is a dangerous moron. He will let Russia do whatever they want. He will pull all of our resources. He's promised it to his followers that he would end the war in Ukraine by letting Russia have whatever they wanted. And they will. He'll cut off all aid to NATO. He'll disband NATO. He's essentially said that. So, you know what? There's nothing, when we have men on a shooting range, right, with our rifles, do you know that all of the range controllers and range instructors keep loaded pistols with them? Because there's always one guy that's the drunk monkey that gets up and starts shooting other people on the range. Okay? Donald Trump is the drunk monkey with a machine gun. We do not want him you cannot rely on the survival of Ukraine if Donald Trump and Viktor Orban and Vladimir Putin create a little axis of idiots. So no, there's
Yes,
nothing good about Trump.
you cannot imagine how intense is the discussion in the commentary section of
Good.
this
It should be
YouTube
intense,
channel.
but you look, I'm an intelligence professional.
Yeah,
Okay?
but
I
this
only
discussion,
deal in reality. I cannot deal in ideology or your personal politics about immigrants or women or whatever. You want Ukraine to survive? You better pray to God Joe Biden wins this election, because Donald Trump will turn whatever Russia has over to Ukraine, and he will pull every weapon system off. And you will see a lot of people, including my friends in the Ukraine Legion, die. And at that point, I'll have to go back over there because I'll be pretty mad.
absolutely. The discussion is not about Trump's relations or connections to Russia
Oh,
or if he's good or not. The discussion is about the number and names and nationalities of his wives. And I tell you what, you should be happy
three.
that you only
Five
count the
children with
wives.
3 baby mamas.
Absolutely, but the discussion is really, I have never seen such discussion about, like, let me say, the technical characteristics of any missile. Like, just everyone wants to discuss the names of the wives. Okay, but what you have already mentioned, once again, like to get to all the topics which are serious, you have mentioned these Russia connections and the level of support by of the populists, and we have seen in Europe this development. We have seen in Germany, in the eastern part of Germany, former GDR, the most popular party is AfD, and AfD is practically a far-right party with a lot of people in the leadership who are certified Nazis. For example, the Mr. Höcke is been allowed by a German court to be called a Nazi, and he may not sue you if you call him a Nazi because it's a court decision. You have France with Marine Le Pen, who has not won the parliamentary elections, but frankly speaking, she was very close to that, and she's still a winner of the European parliamentary elections. And you see, like other nations, like where we always say it's on the edge. And when it's on the edge, it's a dangerous signal because you practically send a signal to other countries. Look, democracy is a dangerous thing. Every election is about survival of your nation. Don't go there.
Right.
Like, what
Right.
does it say about our political system that the right-wing populists are so popular?
First, if you guys can, if you still have access to Amazon, I'm pretty sure you can find the online version. I wrote a book called The Plot to Destroy Democracy. And it was about how Russian intelligence worked with right-wing extremists in Europe and created this constellation of Moscow-supported United Russia's political party, supported political groups and conferences that were being held throughout Europe every year. AfD was a huge one. The Austrian right-wing political party was another one, which they got into power. Marine Le Pen took 38 million euros from Vladimir Putin. And in one of my favorite memes of all time, when she lost in 2017, it had a picture of a stern Vladimir Putin looking at Marine Le Pen. And the caption was, "Where's my money at, bitch?" So, these people promised each other on the far right that they're going to win. There is only so much populism that will work in Europe. And a lot of this is dirty, dirty Russian money, alliances with Russian organizations. They bought the National Rifle Association. In the United States, the right-wing evangelical extremist Christians are all very pro Moscow now. The alt-right, the right-wing extremists, everyone who attacked the Capitol on January 6th. I have a T-shirt that I bought online. They stopped producing it, called I'd rather be a Russian than a Democrat. I mean, this is a dangerous situation. But since the end of the fall of the Cold War, we don't see oligarchic autocracies as an equal threat to communism, because they're like us and they have money and they can hire lawyers. When they went after when Moscow went after Bill Browder, one of the most amazing things that I saw that I couldn't comprehend, because I was an old Cold War guy, was that they had hired the best law firm in the United States in England to help get him arrested, to have Magnitsky, his lawyer, arrested, and then killed him, and then tried to get Browder with these red notices by playing the legal system of the West. The Soviets never did that. That's when I knew we're in a different world. It's about money, giant oceans of money in which passports have no meaning. And that these people knew that money would talk so much they could send the most deadly nerve agent into England and carry out a chemical weapons attack on an ex-spy that killed British citizens, and nobody did nothing. That's how the Russians have manipulated the system now. They understand their money talks, and we're
And then
willing to
like
listen.
and then they bring Henkel to the United Nations and
That
let
that
him talk on their in their favor.
Jackson
Like, by
Hinkle,
the
that's
way, like
disgraceful.
the questions was, why doesn't Malcolm have Biden's ear?
Malcolm may have Biden's ear. I'm very well known in the White House. You guys know I was on MSNBC as the terrorism and intelligence analyst for 7 years. I left that job and joined the International Legion because I was in the Ukrainian army. I have not been invited back for some strange reason. They have a belief that if you are a participant in a war, then somehow your opinion's illegitimate. I don't know. But I spent 7 years speaking U.S. news media. The press secretary was a contributor with me on MSNBC. I know, actually, the State Department's press spokesman. I know a lot of people over there. I know the vice president knows my name personally. Joe Biden knows who I am. I just cannot get through to their individuals on a less than political level. But if I need to pull a string politically, I know how to get there, because I am an African American that has fought in the Ukrainian army. And I understand the values Ukraine is fighting for, and people take my opinion very seriously in Washington.
But being the continuing being serious, can you explain the logic behind Jack Sullivan's decisions and his point of view. Like, he's not
No,
a stupid person. Like,
it's
why is he thinking so?
because he works in old school realpolitik. And what he doesn't do is again, there is no founding ideology that the United States believes they're fighting. They believe that they're fighting little currents as opposed to a tsunami of money that is now washing over the world that is buying the end of liberal democracy. That's what's happening. And Ukraine is the one rock that wave is crashing on that cannot break through. And everybody else still wants to see it not as a tsunami. They want to see it as, a little tidal wave. Not a tidal wave, but a little, rise and lowering of the tide. It is not. We're in a situation that is far more dangerous than communism, right? Because
Indeed,
now they can
indeed.
afford everything. They can afford to buy entire parliaments. They bought the Republican Party.
That is one of the things I cannot understand. Like, cause like you can be for the Republicans, you can be against them, but if you look at the star Republicans like Ronald Reagan, like, he would have never like seat at the same table with these
Ronald
guys. He
Reagan.
would have like pulled his gun and said, "Look, if you continue to talk what you are talking,
Kill you.
there, yeah, there will be that person in the room."
Yeah, but
Um,
that's a different era. These are people who were thinkers, who fought in World War II or served in that era. And now we're talking about dealing with their children who are all about money and are no longer about the ideology of the love of country and all of that. So, and Russia has bought the Jackson Hinkles of the world, just buys them outright. Look, Elon Musk delves more in right-wing extremist conspiracy theory because he has decided he is the self-appointed savior of global foreign policy. And because he has money, you should listen to him. In the old days, the guys who landed at Normandy and fought World War II were the decision makers. They understood through blood they were not going to be playing this game. Those people are gone. And a lot of the right wingers, the hardest core right wingers in the United States who are pro Trump and anti Ukraine, are veterans who were in the war on terrorism, with exception of guys like Dan Crenshaw, who was a SEAL. And they think that they understand the nature of this war. They do not. They do not. I spent 20 years in the military. I spent 10 years as an intelligence contractor, and I could add up everything that was fired at me in that time in the Middle East, right? I only worked in Middle East, North Africa. And I'm pretty sure that I got hit with more than that in a 24-hour period in my first week in Kharkiv, my first day in Kharkiv. And we were getting hit every hour from Russia. And if you haven't been under sustained multi-day bombardment like I was when I was in Kupiansk, and they were just spending thousands of shells just to see if they could find you, then you haven't lived. These people don't understand this. We haven't had this intensity of war since Korea or World War II.
Absolutely. And that is, I think, what we also miss in Germany. Our politicians, like our chancellor, is a politician who grew up as a local politician of a municipality. Most of our politicians make career making their path through municipalities. They are perfect in creating coalitions within a small city or a larger
Mhm.
city, dealing with bicycle lanes, parks, schools, etc., which is good, which is important for people in normal daily life, but which brings you quite different qualities compared to countering a dictator. Because in a city, you aim for a compromise, you aim for understanding the other part and finding a deal practically.
Yep.
When you deal with Vladimir Putin, you need to be reckless, you need to be aggressive, you need to be fearless. And we miss really politicians like Konrad Adenauer. Like, if you think like the founding father of the German Federal Republic of Germany, of true free Germany, Konrad Adenauer, he was an older man when he in 49 when he became a chancellor, like over 70 years old. He has experienced
Two
World
wars.
War One. He was experienced World War Two. He was imprisoned by the Nazis. He was interrogated by Gestapo. He was put under house arrest. He has seen everything. Like, you cannot scare an old man who has survived Gestapo interrogation.
What are you going to do?
Like,
Kill him?
what can you threaten him with? And now we have Chancellor Scholz, who has never faced anything more dangerous than a strike of a local bus company. And of course, he's afraid of Vladimir Putin because he doesn't understand how Putin acts. He wants to avoid the conflict because it's all his history says him avoid a conflict and you will be rewarded. But Konrad Adenauer knew you just don't let it happen because you will lose everything.
Let me tell you, I can understand this because, and I'm going to put it this way, there's a big difference between the Rathaus and the Reichstag. Right? I mean, what you're planning Oktoberfest and Christmas festival, Pfingsten, as opposed to leading a nation or destroying a nation the way that the Nazis did. But it was on a global scale. Two entirely different ways of dealing with the public. And I can understand where Schultz is a little inadequate in making those decisions. Like you said, it's not gonna, it's not about putting in new bike lanes or dog parks. It's about dealing
Absolutely.
with people that would, if they could, kill you.
Absolutely. And here, by the way, the question from Kellen Dunn, who asks, does Malcolm believe Ukraine can win on the battlefield with Europe's support only? No US because of Trump.
That depends on the amount of support. First off, a lot of intelligence. I like that today they are Trump proofing NATO, which is Europe will be, or NATO will now be European spearheaded with the US level of support just in case the resources get cut off. I believe Ukraine can beat anybody on the ground. It will cost more men, it will cost more manpower, it will cost more equipment. But I think Ukraine can win on the ground. Now, if some countries like Germany would loosen up, it could happen a lot quicker than it could anywhere else. You've got Finland and Sweden now providing weapon systems, resources. The French intelligence is just as good as ours. They're all NATO weapons, NATO intelligence systems out there. So I think that they can win. It'll just take longer.
Let me bring this discussion to this level of like the forecasting and prognosis and analysis. We know that for the last 12 months, the Ukrainians suffered of immense deficit of ammunition, most of all
Right.
like 155 artillery shells.
Right.
And that was the reason why the FPV drones have gained that much momentum and that much importance, because they were practically a substitution for their
Right.
artillery shells. I have personally experienced it many times when you bring drones to the army, which are surveillance drones, like light surveillance drones. They tell you, but they're like drone people. They tell you everything about all types of drones,
Right.
bombers, kamikaze, surveillance, everything, and they tell you how important the FPV kamikaze drones are for them. And now, like, Russia has about 10 times more, they say, shells than Ukraine has. But even
Mhm.
it's like 5 or 8 times, it's a huge difference. But next year, the EU should be able to produce as much shells as we wanted the EU to be able to produce this year. That means 1 million shells a year. And South Korea comes and other countries. Can Ukraine get that momentum in firepower and just push the Russians out of Ukraine?
Well, first off, pushing the Russians out of Ukraine is really a matter of creating enough mass to break through. I think that the first major shift in the Overton window, so to speak, in Ukraine's favor will be bringing the F-16s in. Not because the F-16s are going to be doing air defense missions. They can. The F-16s are going to be throwing precision weapons in a way that Russia cannot defend. right? I mean, the Ukrainians have been very successful in destroying S-400 and other weapon systems, S-300, S-400 air defense systems around Crimea, blinding the radars with the Su-24 launching the harm anti-radiation missile and things like that, and just going out and paying people to blow things up or set fire to things has been dramatically successful over there. I think what they need is more massed precision rocketry, multiple rocket launch systems like HIMARS and other systems out there, and longer range fires to sop up the logistics, to hit concentrated weapon, concentrations of personnel who are coming to the front. And that way you dry up the front to where you can get a breakthrough in a specific place. But that's going to take more hard equipment, more Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, and other things that are coming there. The Leopard ones that are coming, and they're coming. But can you do it without the United States? Yes, it'll be harder. Can we get the massive artillery? Let me tell you, artillery's good. Precision artillery's better, and they have figured out some of the systems that don't work, like the GPS guided weapon systems. The Russians have very good jamming. Early on last summer, we had a really big problem with that, but we had a very innovative way of dealing with Russian jamming of artillery, because it's a big system. I've seen one that was captured near Hostomel. We find them and we blow them up. Okay, we drop a drone into it, or you fly a rocket, or a beaver drone or something like that. You just blow it up. And look, tell me, I'm a guy who came from the signals intelligence world when I worked at NSA at one point. I love killing signals. You know why? You don't have to collect against them anymore. There's no more jamming if the jammer's destroyed, right? So then your GPS artillery is awesome. But I think that hard artillery shells, which are good for area denial, I think drones are actually better killing machines in that respect. The Russians hate them. The Russians can't stand drones. But like all things in combined arms, they have to combine to create a mesh, a network that rolls through and can really give you the ability to break through. And we're going to still need NATO, and I think Europe can lead in that. But again, we're still going to need the United States. Can Ukraine take land? Yes. The question of when they hit that critical line of defense and they break through. And I think at some point it'll happen, maybe even by accident, or NATO will have assessed that there is a spot here where there's an opening, and if you break through and you suddenly, like 92nd Mech, I went on the offense with the 92nd Mech in Kharkiv province. They were the iron fist to break through, and they broke the hell through everything, right? We were hitting objectives that were supposed to be 3 days in our first evening. So you never know when it'll come through, and it's the kind of attack that will break through to the Russian rear, and you can start flanking entire provinces. Who knows? It could happen in Zaporizhia or Donetsk, but you got to get through the minefields. You got to get through the dragon teeth. You got to get through the defensive fighting positions, and you have to have enough manpower to push through and maneuver. We shall see.
Absolutely. I've personally been 10 days ago at the drones workshop of the 92nd Brigade Achilles Battalion. Awesome. And I can tell you, it was amazing. It was like visiting the quintessence of a candy shop, like hundreds and hundreds of square meters, hundreds and hundreds of drones of all possible shapes and forms, and aims, like 7-inch, 10-inch, 4-rotor blades, 6-rotor blades, ground drones, aerial drones, drones which drop devices, drones which install devices, everything you can imagine. And the guys are real professionals, like absolutely amazing, true patriots too.
Yeah. Let's take one more question.
Yeah, speaking about because I think we need to slowly finalize it, because we have already consumed 1 hour and 45 minutes of your time.
What?
And
Really?
yeah, that goes fast. But speaking about the end of this war and how Ukraine can significantly change the balance of power in Ukrainian cause. Permission to strike Russia's territory. We know that what Ukrainians want to do most is to hit all Russian air bases, all Russian strategic aviation bases, to stop the Russians, prevent the Russians from shooting cruise missiles from Russian territory against Ukraine. Will it happen?
I think it will. Let me tell you, again, the Ukrainians are just devilishly adaptive. If I was Budanov and I worked for him for a while, I would have prepare in World War II, we used to have these things called 1,000 bomber raids. 1,000 bombers would show up over Berlin day and night. The British at night, the Americans in the day. 1,000 bombers, each carrying what is it, 8 2,000-pound bombs or 16 500-pound bombs, and would just carpet bomb that country. Now, it was aimed at killing the civilian population and breaking industry. Didn't do the greatest job of that. But if I were Ukraine, I would have a 1,000 bomber day prepared. I would make sure that Beaver drones or their longest range drones, I would be planning the utter destruction of every major air bases, oil, kerosene, logistics, or runway. Forget the runways. Get the aircraft. They've done an experiment on a few of these raids, but just to where Moscow or Russia is being invaded by drones everywhere. 100 per base, pick 10 bases, leave nothing but utter destruction in your wake. That's what I would do. And then when the Russians are going, oh my God, that's terrible, I'd do it 72 hours later again. Right? Because guys get lazy about the second day after a raid, and they just go, well, the base is on fire, they never hit us again. Yeah. All right. But I would make a national priority of building these drones. I would get the United States to pay for it quietly, have quiet drone warehouses, and I would just blanket Moscow in drones, the way they're doing with the oil industry, you know? But I would make Drone Day 2024 a weekly event. But, that's me wishing and dreaming.
Absolutely, that sounds amazing, and I have heard even from German experts saying that, look, actually, the Western response to Russia's terrorist bombings against Ukrainian cities is one Ukrainian civilian killed, Ukraine gets one tomahawk. It would help Russia to stop bombing Ukrainian cities pretty soon. Like 10 Ukrainian citizens killed, Ukraine get 10 tomahawks. And I tell you, like I like when you constantly in Ukraine in the civilian regions, you see how much life of people has been affected. Like I have never been in trenches like you spent months and months like fighting the Russians. I've spent like a lot of time with the civilians, and it's amazing how they adapt, how they try to combine this war reality and their wish to stay sane and to find like some anchors of their life. Like many in the West, like say, oh, the Ukrainians go to bars, or they go to children playground,
Mm.
or they spend their time like with their kids playing around, or with their loved ones, with their dogs, etc. It
Hmm.
means that there is no war in Ukraine. Like idiots.
Oh, no.
Uh, all like if you look at London on the bombs, the British people on the German fell to this blitz bomb raids. In the evening, they were hiding from the bomb, so they helped to clear the rubble and save the people. And in the
Hmm.
day, they went to cafes because it what helps you to stay
Yeah.
alive. I've been to Mirnograd, like just 20 kilometers from the front line. Like
I
every second, yeah.
Well, I had some idiot who was a friend of Elon Musk come out and attack me when I did an interview with NBC News, and a cruise missile attack happened. But we had been at air raid for 3 hours, and I had completely forgotten that we were at air raid. And it takes 3 hours for a caliber missile to go from the northern part of the Black Sea to fly through to hit Lviv. And I was on, I was doing operation out of Lviv, and it flew right over our head. I have people right now to this day tell me we were faking a cruise missile attack. It killed 6 of my neighbors 500 meters away. You could see the smoke cloud. You could hear the missiles over your head. And here's one of the complaints. People say, well, people were walking around like nothing was going on. Yeah, people
Of
walk around
course,
during air raids because you know what? You can't stop every minute of your life and get into a bunker in a city of 500,000 people when you're 3 hours into an air raid. You got to get, important things like coffee and hot dogs.
of course, of course. Once again, like Mirnograd, 20 kilometers from the front line, constantly hit by Russian missiles. Every second day, a massive shell attack. Every second house is hit. Then you stay in the city suburb, and you see like a coffee shop, and in that coffee shop you get like 10 types of coffee: Americano, cappuccino, latte macchiato, everything, Americano macchiato, espresso, doppio espresso. You can get it with 3 types of vegan milk, with like some sort of coconut milk, with some nuts milk, etc. And you say,
First,
oh, it's so luxury, like people have their life as if nothing happens. No,
you,
it's because
first,
it's the only same thing. If you look around, there are houses where the whole entrances are missing because they've been destroyed by Russian missile. And that coffee shop works only until 20 hours, until 8 p.m. because there will be no electricity anymore. It's what
Ukraine
keeps them
also
alive.
Ukraine also has the finest coffee society on this planet. I am sorry. I loved my Ukrainian coffee. You can go out in the middle of the night, and if you can find an Oko gas station or a SoCar or some gas station, you can get yourself a good coffee. You can get yourself a double espresso, all right, or a cafe macchiato. That doesn't mean the artillery's not hitting us. Okay? It
Absolutely,
just means you can get
absolutely.
good coffee.
Absolutely, and the soldiers go there, and the civilians, and that's what keeps them alive. But on this moment, I may not more keep you, Malcolm. I would have gladly chatted with you for hours and hours. You are a source of incredible inspirations and information and knowledge and wisdom. Thank you so much for what you do, for what you have done, for what you will do. And thank you, audience, for your great questions and for your interest. And don't forget to like, to share, to subscribe. I cannot see now if we have like 9,000 subscribers, but if we not, I'm really disappointed in our like conversion of views into subscriptions. But anyway, subscribe to this channel, subscribe to Malcolm's channel. You will not regret it. Thank you so much, Malcolm, for what you have done, and thank you for your interview. Thank you
My
so much.
pleasure. Great. Take care.
Okay, now I will wait until it ends, and I will tell you when we are offline.
Mhm.